Hello there, good morning. Welcome to Ask the Expert, an award-winning daily series from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments of the live feed. If you need any more advice, then please join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. You have accountants and business experts on hand 24/7. During the live session today, we will be running a poll, so please do engage with it, and I will reveal the results at the end. So I'm Toby Mildon. I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant. I work with heads of HR and business leaders so that they can attract the most diverse talent into their business and also create an environment where people can thrive, where people feel respected for who they are and empowered and able to progress within the organization. On the call today, I just want to share with you a few of my predictions for diversity and inclusion in 2022. You've no doubt seen lots of headlines over the last year about diversity and inclusion within the business world, and the trend for more focus on diversity and inclusion is just set to continue this year. Over the last 18 months to 2 years, the pandemic and COVID-19 has certainly shone a light on inequalities within our society. No doubt you've seen headlines about the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on members of our community, so people like women in the workplace, people with disabilities and long-term health conditions, and also people from ethnic minority backgrounds. And I think the organisations that I talk to certainly have become a lot more aware of their role as employers within the workplace and what they can do to reduce some of the inequalities that we are finding in society. And we see these inequalities persisting and existing. So, for instance, I'm beginning to start to see a division between those who want to return to the workplace or the office and those who would prefer to work remotely or work from home. It could be that they have a preference for working from home and they feel much more productive working remotely or working from home. But it could be because they have concerns about their health and well-being. It could be that they have a disability or long-term health condition, which makes it riskier to return to the workplace. It could be that they're caring for an elderly parent or a child who has a disability or long-term health condition, and they want to minimize any risk of COVID-19 on their family. And what that's creating in some of the organisations that I work with is a bit of division between those who do go into the office, who perhaps have easier access to information, to promotion opportunities, for example, and those who are working from home. Something else that we've seen in the press over the last 18 months to 2 years is really how the pandemic has impacted on our mental health and well-being. So a lot of advanced organizations that I work with, they can be big organizations, they can be small organizations. Size of the business doesn't really matter, but they do have a focus on the mental health and well-being of their employees, and they're putting things in place to support the mental health and well-being. So it ranges from giving people time off to look after their mental well-being, providing employee assistance programs so that people can get help over the phone, providing mindfulness apps. There's all sorts of initiatives out there to kind of help our mental health and well-being. But what we are starting to notice is that there's a closer alignment between mental health interventions and initiatives and the work that diversity and inclusion or HR practitioners are doing within their organizations, and bringing them both closer together. My third prediction for 2022 is that hybrid working is here to stay. This is the new normal, as they say, or continued way of working. But it's really important that with hybrid working, that we ensure that there is still equality for everybody. What I mean by that is that we make sure that um, that that there's equality between people who are continuing to work remotely, continuing to work from home, and those that do go into the office or have to go into the workplace because their job because the job that they do cannot be done remotely. So, for example, they might work in a distribution center, or they might work out in the field or on the road, or they might be on the shop floor, so to speak. So we need to make sure that regardless of what people do in the business, that hybrid working or agile working or flexible working is made available to everybody. I work with some clients who say that, for instance, their staff that work in the factory cannot have any flexible working compared to those who work in operational roles in the back office, for instance. But actually, there are plenty of opportunities to introduce flexible working on the shop floor. So, for instance, allowing somebody to start their shift just half an hour later than they normally would can be really helpful. It can make a huge difference in somebody's ability to take their children to school, for instance, or pop in and check in on their elderly parent on their way to work to make sure that they're up and they've had breakfast and things like that. So don't underestimate those kind of small acts of flexibility within an organization. But with hybrid working as well, what we've seen is the introduction of new technology. We've seen how many more people are using platforms like Zoom. There are new technologies that are coming on the market to make life, online work life, a lot more easier and quicker. But what I am noticing is that these new technologies don't exactly have a great focus on accessibility. So they are launching their products, but those products are not necessarily the best when it comes to accessibility for people who might have different disabilities. So it could be that somebody's blind and therefore they need to use assistive technology in order to get onto tech. So when you are picking technologies for a new hybrid way of working with your team, please just make sure that you're also looking at the accessibility of those systems that you're choosing. It might be that you don't have somebody on your team who has any accessibility requirements right now, but it's better to preempt it in case somebody does join your team who has accessibility requirements. But it could be a client or a customer that you don't yet work with that needs that technology. So it's better to be safer than sorry and just add accessibility as part of one of the things that you check when you're picking new systems or technologies to use. My next prediction for this year is that retaining talent is going to be harder more than ever. We've seen the headlines around the great resignation that's happened over the last year or so. And there is such a demand for skills. It's not just the pressures that the pandemic has brought us. Brexit has also brought us a lot of pressure around skills shortages. We're seeing lots of industries where they're just finding it difficult to find their skills or tap into those skills. So that means that from a diversity and inclusion perspective, there needs to be much more of a focus on looking at the culture of your business to retain your talent, creating the right environment. And one of the things that I do with my clients is help them define their culture, how they want to kind of articulate their culture to their current staff, but also to people that they want to attract to come and work with them in the future, so that they are seen as an attractive place to work. There's a number of things. I think when we look at kind of talent shortages, there's going to be a move to working with more freelancers. a move towards the gig economy and getting people to come and work for you for short-term engagements, recruiting talent from abroad. Again, what this means is that we need to create the right kind of culture environment. We need to look, for example, around cultural intelligence if you're going to be recruiting people from abroad as well. So there's many predictions there for you for this year around diversity and inclusion. So what I'm going to do now is going to take some of your questions that you're sending in online. So thank you ever so much for sending them in. Please do continue to send in your questions to me. So first of all, got a question here from Raoul on Twitter. Raoul says, what major shifts do you hope will take place with workplace diversity in 2022, particularly while everything is still in a state of flux? Yeah, really great question. Thanks for sending that across. I think some of the major shifts that we will see will be the ones that I've already outlined. I think that what we will see, or what I am starting to notice, is that diversity and inclusion, or the topic of diversity and inclusion, is not just one of those discussions for big businesses employing thousands of people who have large HR departments, who might even employ a full-time diversity and inclusion manager on their team. I'm increasingly working with a lot of kind of small and medium-sized organizations who are having a focus on diversity and inclusion. And that is happening for a number of reasons. One, there are lots of businesses who are being founded by millennials and people that are just coming out of university. And I want to avoid kind of any stereotyping here, because it's not just millennials that have an interest, but certainly there is a generational interest in diversity and inclusion. And so those younger people setting up businesses are really conscious about things like diversity and inclusion, the environment, the impact of their business operations on the environment, social responsibility within business, that kind of thing. The other reason why small and medium-sized businesses are paying a bit more attention to it is, first of all, I think they see it as a differentiator when it comes to attracting talent to come and work for them. And as I said just now, it's there is a difficulty in attracting talent because of the pressures of the pandemic and Brexit and things, and skills shortages around industries like tech, for instance. But also when there's a lot more interest and demand from funders on diversity and inclusion. So businesses who are going out to get seed funding are then being asked by angel investors and various investors to have much more of a focus on things like, well, the whole ESG agenda. So the environment and social and governance and diversity and inclusion and things like that. So I hope that has answered your question. We have a message now from Cassie on Facebook. Cassie says, there are so many training programs for equality that you can sign up to online, but some are quite pricey. Do you think it's worth investing in dedicating diversity training, or could I use free resources and invest that money in my team? Cassie, that's a really great question. This is kind of one of those yes and no answers, really. I think, first of all, there are lots of training programs out there. Prices do vary, as does quality, and a high price doesn't necessarily mean high quality, but equally low price doesn't mean low quality either. So I think, first of all, it's important to find the training that works for you and your team and your learning objectives. So begin with what learning outcomes or objectives you want for your team, and then reverse engineer that to find the best solution. And it could be that you can do something quite low cost, or it might be that you need to bring in somebody and invest in that. But with any business decision that you make, it's not necessarily about the cost of something, it's about your return on investment. So if you, for example, if you invest in diversity and inclusion training, which improves the culture of your business, and as a result, you can retain your people for longer, or your turnover or attrition goes down, then you're going to be saving money on having to replace those people. So think about when my clients are thinking about which training initiatives to invest in, I get them to kind of calculate their business case or think about return on investment rather than just pure price or pure cost. So Abby on Instagram says, do you think unvaccinated people have any claim when it comes to discrimination? And as an employer, how should we balance their rights against the safety of other staff members? Yeah, this is a fantastic question, Abby. Obviously very topical. I think one of the things that we have to bear in mind, I might be a bit out of my depth on this question, is that, first of all, when it comes to discrimination, I would refer back to the Equality Act, which is our equality legislation in the UK, where we've got 9 protected characteristics around discrimination. And people being unvaccinated is not a protected characteristic as per the Equality Act. I think, first of all, you need to think about, I suppose, like a risk assessment of your operations. And I don't know what business you do, but for instance, I'll share a personal example with you. I have a disability, and I need to have 24-hour care. And part of my disability is that I've got weak respiratory muscles. So for me, if I was to get COVID-19, it would be quite serious for me. Therefore, when I'm recruiting carers, I won't take on anybody who is not vaccinated, because I need to think about my own personal safety and well-being. So that's, I suppose, like an operational decision that I've made. But for my diversity and inclusion consultancy, for example, a lot of work that I do is done remotely. Well, all of the work that I do is done remotely, really. So anybody that I work with, therefore the risk is a lot lower, because we're not spending time together in the same room. They're not going out to meet clients face to face, because it's all done on Zoom and things like that. So the risk assessment is that it's actually a lower risk. And then we have protocols in place, like self-isolating, wearing masks. If I do have to do a face-to-face workshop, then making sure that everyone does lateral flow tests and things like that beforehand, and not attend workshops if they test positive, that kind of thing. So I think it really comes back to doing a bit of a risk assessment and putting a policy in place. So next question is from Roland on Facebook. Roland says, in my business, we're trying to make a real effort to make sure all of our marketing and content is accessible to all. Things like audio description, sign language, and so on. However, it does add quite a big cost. How much should we be budgeting for this? And is there a way to build it into the process in future? Yeah, really great question, Roland. So first of all, it does add cost to your comms. I think there's some ways of reducing cost by being a bit more strategic about it. So, which I'm sure you're doing, because the fact that you're being proactive about this might suggest that you're doing this anyway. But things like if we take audio description, for example, if you are using an external comms agency, just being upfront with them in the brief that you want audio description produced, they can kind of budget that in and factor that in rather than springing it on them. And my gut's telling me that that's probably what you're doing already if you're being kind of quite proactive about this already. So I think, first of all, it is about budgeting it in. It might also be the other thing around accessibility is that you don't necessarily have to do everything all at once. So if you're producing an advert, for example, you don't have to have that audio described and have subtitles and have a BSL interpreter in the bottom right-hand corner. It could be that you could just subtitle it with some audio description, for instance. So there are ways of kind of thinking about maximum what you would need to do to kind of have the maximum impact. I'm going to caveat that by saying that I'm not a kind of deep expert on accessibility. What I would suggest doing, though, is reaching out to a great company that I work with called Hassel Inclusion. So HASSELL, Hassel Inclusion. And they are specialists in web accessibility, app accessibility, digital, well, any kind of digital accessibility, including comms. And actually, it reminds me, last year they created a cheat sheet on how to make internal comms and external comms accessible. So it's worth just reaching out to Hassel Inclusion, and they can probably send that to you. I think you could probably download it from their website, actually. So cool. Really great questions. Thank you. They're coming in thick and fast, so it's really great to see them coming in. So the next question to come in is from Dora on Twitter, and Dora says, "Sorry if this is an obvious question. Don't worry. No such thing as an obvious question. But I've noticed that some of my colleagues have started putting pronouns in their email signature. But even people I know are straight, not LGBTQ+. Why are they doing this?" Yeah, really great question. So a lot of people are putting pronouns in their email signatures as an act of allyship, really. So there are people who put their pronouns in their signatures. So by pronouns, I mean, things like he, she, they, them, because the pronouns that they want to be called by are not necessarily obvious. So, somebody might present as want to refer to as being he, for example, like me, but actually their preference would be they or she. A lot of people in businesses are just doing it as an act of allyship and support for people within the LGBTQ+ community. So if you want to support your colleagues in the LGBTQ community, Dora, then feel free to add pronouns to your signature. I'm sure it'll be greatly appreciated by the community. So next question, Mark on Instagram says that we've made massive strides to close pay gaps at my company. Most of the disparities were a result of rises or bonuses as rewards. Now that system has gone, I want to find a way to reward employment that still incentivizes them. Any tips? Yeah, great question. I think Uh, there's loads of ways of rewarding staff. You know, there's could be gifts, time off, and things like that. I'm not sure why your bonuses or reward has gone, or why that system has gone, rises or reward. Sorry, you said rise as a result of rises or bonuses as rewards. I'm not sure why that system has gone for you. But whenever I work with clients, I would say it's best not to scrap bonuses or rewards, but to have a very detailed look as to any inequalities in that process or system. So it could be that bonuses, the way that bonuses are allocated, is a subjective process rather than objective, and therefore all sorts of implicit or unconscious biases can creep into the process, and to try and make it as objective as possible. And also making sure that you use data to help objectify the system or the process, so that you're making objective decisions. So it might be that, so any organization, I would suggest that, first of all, before scrapping any kind of bonuses or rewards process, just make sure that your existing process is as objective as possible. I've got another question here. I think this will be the final question, then I'll reveal the answer of the polls. If I haven't managed to answer your question, or maybe I answered it, but I didn't quite hit the mark for you, it does happen. It is first thing in the morning as well. Feel free to reach out to me. You can either email me or connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can chat offline. But got a question here from Alexis on Facebook, who says, do you have any advice for joining in with office celebrations for things like Diwali and Dia de los Muertos? My team loves an excuse to bring food in, but I don't know how to raise that maybe the costumes could be insensitive or inappropriate or appropriate. Yeah, great question. I think, first of all, it's probably worth connecting with your colleagues who are celebrating Diwali, for their religious and belief reasons, to see if they do find people wearing costumes insensitive or not. I personally, I would want to sense check that with them to make sure that it is felt that way or not. And if the general vibe in the office is that it is insensitive to do that, then I think you have to kind of be quite brave and have that conversation with people to say, look, I know as an organization we love a good party, and it is good to celebrate things like Diwali or Chinese New Year or Ramadan or whatever, to show allyship for members of staff, to bring, to have that kind of cultural intelligence within the business. The fact that people celebrate or have different celebrations, different religions and beliefs and faiths and things like that. But we need to do that in a respectful and sensitive way, which looks like XYZ, and you might have to spell that out for people. So I think it's worth having that conversation. If I'm not sure what level you are in the organization, but it might be that you have to have a conversation with senior people in the business, because it's the senior people in an organization that will set the tone for the organization, create the culture for the organization. And it might be that you need to get them on board, get them to understand why something might be inappropriate or insensitive, and then help communicate that out to the rest of the organization about what is acceptable or not acceptable. So I hope I managed to answer your question there. So thank you ever so much for all of your questions. I really appreciate it. Some really, really great questions coming in. The poll results are now in. So we asked you, do you believe diversity and inclusion will help your business grow in 2022? Half of you said yes, and half of you said no. So that's really interesting. I wasn't expecting a 50-50 split. I wrote a book called Inclusive Growth, and the reason why I wrote the book was because I wanted people to understand that a more diverse organization helps an organization to grow. There's lots of evidence out there now that a more diverse, more inclusive workplace means a higher performing business, and it helps you grow as an organization. So I think it'll be good. I personally want to see a shift where organizations are seeing diversity and inclusion as an enabler of growth within their business. If you go and get a copy of my book. Sorry, it's a bit of a shameless plug, but it will explain a lot of my kind of thinking and rationale about that. And also, I've just recorded the audiobook version at the moment, so it's with the editors. So if you like listening to audiobooks, then it'll be coming out very soon. So thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with me, then feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit my website, www.mildon.co.uk. Plenty of information on there, plenty of free stuff that you can read. If you click on Insights at the top of my website, you've got podcasts, a link to my book, articles, all sorts of free stuff that you can read if D&I is of interest to you. Coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow, we've got Lucy Johnson, who's an accountant, and she's the founder of Isle Bookkeep. Tune in to find out everything that you need to know about self-assessment. A reminder that if you need any more advice, then please join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. You've got accountants and business experts on hand 24/7. I've really enjoyed answering your questions today. Thank you ever so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful day. Cheers.